Welcome back to Seek Strength and welcome back to Seekistan. Today we're talking about some of our favorite ways of training throws for judo when it comes to S&C training.
So the major thing here is the S&C component for me. People being bigger, stronger, and more powerful above all else has made the biggest difference with the kind of judo style of athlete. I'm talking about big back squats, so aiming for double bodyweight back squats or above. Big deadlifts, 2.5 times body weight is kind of the minimum threshold I like people to hit. Then big power cleans or hang power cleans or heaving hang power cleans. And then standard things, lunges, reverse lunges, front rack lunges, all of these are so valuable. So just making that athlete bigger, stronger, and more powerful makes it a lot easier to be pulling and grabbing and tearing at lads and throwing them around the place.
So the reason this works, so just being generally stronger at these larger compound movements, is because these work quite well because we take our muscles and joints and neuromuscular system through a relatively large range of motion through a consistent exercise that we can incrementally increase the weight during, and we can do it in a safe and consistent manner over a course of time. So we get a large recruitment of motor units, and we can do this very consistently, and this allows us to build up this large scale non-specific strength that when you go practice your sport, in this case judo and the throws of judo, you make it super specific. So a lot of times people might want to maybe recreate stuff in the gym. You might want to do rotational training only and kind of forget about the larger strength stuff. That extra stuff is kind of cherry on top, or a little dusting of icing, you might say. But in reality, the big benefits you get when it comes to throwing or any kind of this body displacement of someone else, you're trying to get someone on the ground, being larger and powerful is the most beneficial style of training you should focus on. Now, we've coached plenty of judo and jiu-jitsu athletes in this, but you can also see this from a point of view of international judo athletes. If you look at one of our favorite athletes, Shohei Ono, for example, he is the definition of a horse. He is legitimately very strong in the squat, in the snatch, and in the power clean. So in this general principle of S&C, when it comes to that, we look for what is the best thing I can do to be the most generally strong while still being safe for my sport, and then can I bring this general strength over into sport when it comes to specificity. Now, when it comes to actual specific judo drills, and I know there's a couple of different scenarios we see a lot in judo, mostly in the gym, but sometimes we'll see them in these kind of training montages, and there's two different scenarios of those. One is the use of resistance bands for throws, and we get asked a lot about this when it comes to judo athletes if we think these are useful. Now, we do like to caveat this with the fact that we are always open to sport-specific institutional knowledge being very beneficial. And while something may seem illogical on the outside, it may in fact be very beneficial if a lot of experienced coaches and athletes stand behind it and they can provide their theory or good reasons of why it works. So we're never in a scenario where we're going to say whatever this institutional knowledge that we see across maybe multiple sports and countries where these people win a lot, I would never discredit that, and we would never discredit that, because institutional coaching knowledge is always a huge benefit. Sports science always has its flaws and is still in some scenarios very early in its development, and so you would always give way to that practical knowledge. However, in those scenarios, resistance bands may line up with the literature because throws are essentially a plyometric exercise or a power exercise, and some of the literature seems to be pointing that accommodating resistance seems quite beneficial for the use of power development. So if we're doing these throws, if we're practicing throws over shoulder, uchimata, something like that, those use of resistance bands may be a way of advancing that plyometric ability. Now, the other scenario we'll see is the kind of three-partner setup where you'll have someone holding the legs of the uke or the dummy, and then the person is throwing them and holding a static position. Now, isometrics are something that are a little bit more hairy. They're a little bit kind of on the grey side when it comes to sports science, if they're beneficial or not. In this scenario, I don't think they're going to give you a massive amount of neuromuscular or muscular development unless you're super untrained. So if you're someone that doesn't do any strength training, maybe you're a younger athlete or you're a newer athlete, you've started later in life, you started judo later in life, and you haven't done a lot of strength training before, these isometrics may be beneficial in the fact that the threshold is quite low for the need for you to progress in terms of your development. So the fatigue and the stimulus you get from these is high enough to pass your relatively low bar of lower overall development.
Now, the next aspect of beneficial strength training or beneficial gym training for judo or for throws in general is definitely the midline, and it's a bit less kind of flashy or a bit less immediately apparent when you go training your midline or training your core to be a bit more stable. And we'll definitely include neck training in on this as one of those kind of secondary exercises that people oftentimes don't enjoy doing too much. So in judo, training of the midline to be more rigid and more stable is beneficial not only in the offensive terms, so in being able to squeeze your body down and pull somebody over your shoulder or pull somebody back behind you. Obviously, the rotational strength and anti-rotational strength there is very, very important, but also in the defensive end of judo. So if we watch a lot of judo matches, a lot of time is spent in this kind of isometric clinch position where people might be slightly relaxed and then someone goes to pull as hard as they possibly can. They're putting a massive amount of power through their two grips, or maybe through two grips and a leg, and then the defensive person in that case has to be as rigid as possible to resist that throw from being done on them. So training of the midline is incredibly important. Our main go-to for training of the midline is always starting with the isometrics, building somebody's capacity with the isometrics first, and then maybe going on to something a little more flashy, maybe isometrics under a bit more load, or maybe we're doing some of the more weighted flexion and extension type drills. So weighted back extensions, weighted sit-ups, weighted reverse hypers. All of these are very, very useful, but they're very much step 2, 3, or 4 on our progression through the midline training. So it always starts off with standard bodyweight isometric movements. We build that to an amount of volume or in a capacity to do that amount of volume, and then we'll move on from there by weighting those isometrics. Now, the neck is trained in a very, very similar way. Oftentimes when we get a judoka or maybe even a rugby player who can come in with a previous neck injury, or they're told by a coach to develop their neck more, oftentimes they'll immediately go to a neck training apparatus. They'll want something which will allow them to move their head through a range of motion. Maybe they're even weighting it through an apparatus in the mouth or an apparatus connected to the head. And that is not where we should start off with the neck training. With the neck training, you immediately start with isometrics. So this is as simple as lying flat on your back on the floor and then pushing the back of your head into the ground. You don't even need your body to be rising off the floor. You certainly don't need to be going to the point of shaking or anywhere near that. All you're doing is slowly building up to the capacity of the neck, both to resist movement rearward, resist movement forward, and from right and to left. Be very, very cautious with the neck training. Neck training is incredibly valuable and very, very important in a sport like judo, where you're going to be thrown and the possibility of landing on your head or neck is quite high. Also, the possibility of concussion is quite high, and we've seen the massive increase in the amount of research being done in concussion and the links to the neck musculature being so, so important. So it is vital you're doing it, but it's vital you're paying attention and slowly going through that kind of crescendo of neck training, similar to the increase in the intensity and the difficulty of the core work.
Now, there's two other areas that athletes are often appreciative for judo that are very beneficial for their throws, and that is their explosive ability and then their coordination. So when it comes to actually being a coordinated athlete, they often forget, though, that you can train both of these abilities to a general extent in the S&C or the gym that will carry over to a certain extent to your sparring and throwing on the mats. The first area in plyometric ability, so we won't go into the specifics of that, doing that for this video, but training explosive ability via appropriate plyometric training is very, very beneficial for your throws. It is a very explosive movement. If you watch high level judo, as a lot of you obviously do if you're watching this video, you'll know that it happens very often incredibly fast. Even for the ultra heavies, they are still moving quite fast, but if you watch anyone below that kind of 100 kilo mark, you'll see that they're unbelievably explosive, incredibly fast. If you watch them drilling and moving through their patterns, they are going super fast. So one of the areas you should definitely train in the gym is the use or the practice of your plyometric training, your explosive training via multiple different scenarios depending on what you're doing. Very often it should be unweighted, whether this looks like depth jumps, box jumps, bounds, bunny hops, any number of these that can increase your general capacity for explosive training. You should do that in the gym because it will benefit it massively. Don't forget though that strength training is a huge component. Approximately half of your explosive ability is based on your force production capacity, and that comes in from part 1 where we're talking about strength and power development. Now, the second area that you can improve in the gym that will massively help your throws is obviously, as you're very aware again, that throws are hugely coordinated. It's outrageously coordinated, the number of steps you need to hit at high rates of speed, and increasing your capacity for hand-eye coordination and body awareness is something that you can actually do quite routinely in the gym. Now, we'll talk about this a bit more in depth in the future and different ways that you can learn about those, and you may have heard us talk about them before. But there is a lot of different things. Any number of drills that build up new neurological connections in your brain are going to be beneficial for your body awareness. Now, you might see someone come into the gym, a younger kid or a teenager, and they just learn those throws within a couple of weeks, or they're much better. Maybe you've been training for 10 years, and after 6 months, they've got a better quality throw than you in some areas. And this is because some athletes, while innately have higher fast twitch fibers, more muscle mass, lower body fat, better quality of tendons for elastic recoil, but some athletes, and a lot of great athletes, have a capacity to learn much faster. Now, you can't change your genetics, but you can change your skill development when it comes to, or improve upon, your ability to learn skills. So doing different things in the gym that improve your body awareness and where different limbs are hugely beneficial. Now, strength training helps with this a massive amount. That's one of the benefits. For example, if you're an elderly patient, strength training is great because it allows whole body, intermuscular and neuromuscular coordination development. I'm talking about stuff like literally the ladder drill is something so beneficial. A lot of people kind of laugh at this, the ladder drill on the floor, running through with your feet. A lot of people can't do this very well. A lot of people laugh at it, but a lot of people who are laughing at that probably can't do that in any great rates of speed. And you see good athletes doing this, you really appreciate how quick they are. You can do stuff like hand-eye coordination drills with a ball, reaction timing, any different number of these. If you do them consistently enough, these will benefit your capacity, and over a couple of months, hopefully you'll find that your capacity to execute your throws is increased with your strength, but also with your coordination capacity.
So I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope it's been beneficial for you in your training. If you're out there and you don't know what to do for your judo training, particularly your judo S and C, have a look at the Seek Strength Training app. There is the Combat Athlete training program on there. This program will be tailored to your own specific numbers. It will change as you complete the sessions, so you'll get the most effective training possible. And also, you're not left on your own. You'll get video feedback from myself and Owen via the members group. Also, you'll have an AI trained coach bot, which is there. It's been trained on all the Seek Strength videos, so you'll get an answer to your question that's come directly from myself and Owen. Thanks very much for watching.